Welcome back to the Civilnet Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Elliott. I'm delighted to be joined again by friend of the show and political commentator, Eric Hacopian. Eric, thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure.
Let's start by unpacking what's going on in downtown Yerevan and Armenia more broadly. Start by giving our listeners some context. What's going on in Tavush? Let's start there.
Well, the demarcation process has started. I mean, they've started marking the border. The reaction to it is mixed. You will get some locals that are supportive of the effort. There's some people that are critical of it. I think this is a combination of things. Some people are critical of it, understanding what it really is, which is you're demarking the border, and so the border is going to come closer to you. And the other side isn't going to keep their word. They're going to militarize the area, so it's not going to be border guards or anything like that. So it doesn't add to the security situation. And there's other people who don't understand it, who think that you're giving away villages that are in Armenia, which is actually not the case. These are places, if you demark them, they're on the other side. So it's a mixed bag. Some of the local leaders have said positive things about the demarcation, but in a place like Armenia, you have to be somewhat careful of that because it's not hard for them to be influenced by the prime minister calling them or other people that have, their funding sources and other things under their control. Sure. So that they're not. But overall, it's a mixed bag. You would get all kinds of opinions.
Yeah, but we've had some debunking of some of the wilder claims. Like apparently we didn't surrender any military positions. There was a hilltop, a contentious hilltop that's strategic that we haven't backed out of. The road hasn't gone under Azeri control. Although these things can change, you never know. But it seems like things have kind of calmed down on the border over there. The villagers are less worried as far as we know. I mean, there's no more roads being blocked up there. It's all in Yerevan now. Has any new information come to light? Because the last time that we talked about this, both of us were pretty visibly upset by what was going on. Has anything made you change your opinion, either for the better or for the worse, or?
No, it's the same because my objection to this is not the demarcation. My objection to this is the fact that you have demarcation in which we're doing all the giving and we're not demarking parts of the border in which we're supposed to get our areas back.
Well, the Azeris cleared out 3 hectares for us apparently. That's 0.001% of everything that they've taken from us. But yeah.
So no, I think so. It's that, and secondly is the fact that I don't trust the other side to keep their word, i.e. that this is going to be border guards, that it's not going to be militarized. They could do that in a heartbeat, and you're back to a much bigger problem very quickly. Yeah. My objections to this is not demarcation. My objection to this is that I fundamentally don't trust the other side.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. Tell us, is there a difference between, just for context, right? So movement led by Bishop Bagrat, who's the Srpazan of Tavush, has left the border villages and have essentially marched down all the way to Yerevan, kind of mimicking Nikol Pashinyan's 2018 march, also from Yerevan down into Yerevan. Is there a differentiation between the core crowd and the broader support group? I'm sure some of them are genuinely worried. Tell us what you've observed.
I think there's first of all, I was there at the crowd. You're probably looking at a crowd of about 20,000 people. Which in and of itself makes it the largest anti-government demonstrations in Armenia since the revolution. Much bigger than, for example, anything that happened during the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, actually. So this is a different kind of thing. I think the people that have angst, questions, and concerns about the general, what they see as the insecurity of the country or the weakness of the country, or the continued humiliation of the country, are much larger than the people that are essentially around Archbishop Bagrat. So this is not, I think the number of people that are concerned is wider than necessarily the 20,000 is not a reflection of the angst or the level of support. I think that the issue that he's raising and the position that he has far greater support, if not majority, but significant minority support than the people that are necessarily like him or are behind him. So I think we need to differentiate the two. And the lesson for this government is, if you think 20,000 is a small number, don't be fooled by that. There's a lot more people that have angst and concerns about this. Yeah. But I think the movement itself has distinct limitations that is not likely to lead to anything larger than what we saw yesterday or to regime change.
Yeah, let's actually, before we unpack who's there, since you were there yourself yesterday, tell us what happened. They got into Yerevan. What transpired from then on?
Well, it was they got into Yerevan. The crowd was very mixed, to be honest with you. These were not the usual. You know, in Armenia, when they have the rent-a-crowd, this was not the rent-a-crowd. There's an organized crowd. Some parts of it were quite ordinary people. So it's a mixed group of people. It was not, when you have these rent-a-crowds, they tend to be male, 90% older. That was not the case. It was all kinds of people. And it was choreographed very well, from him wearing white. I mean, they got the imagery right.
Carrying a lamb in his arms.
Yeah, that was before. But it is, they got the optics of it correctly. I'm not sure if they got the messaging of it correctly, because if you're going to go there and demand a resignation of a prime minister, you can't do that with 20,000 people. You need to have 200,000 people with you, and 80-90% back on the country, which he does not have. So the movement itself, that was, it was a significant number of people. And again, this is the biggest group of people we've seen come out against this government. But it doesn't have the mass movement feel to it. And given the positions that they're taking, or what they're talking about, or what they're focusing on, they're not likely to build there. There's actually a formula if you actually want to come to power in this country. If you look at polling, it's very clear. There's 4 poles. One, you need to be a nationalist, which is something that this movement, Bagrat, clearly does cover. 2 is to be strong in national defense, or have credibility on the issue, which is obviously they don't. 3 is to be generally pro-Western, or essentially supporting the pivot. And 4, to be critical of Russia. And this movement covers the first one, but is entirely lacking in the other 3. This government in power doesn't cover the first 2. It's almost anti-nationalist in a way. Military matters, they don't even talk about whatever upgrading they're doing, and they're constantly talking about what people see as concessions and humiliations and other things. But they're strong on 3 and 4. So that formula is there. Unfortunately, if you look at the fortunately or unfortunately, if you look at the outline of this movement, it doesn't cover enough of those points. When if you don't cover enough of those points, you're not going to have a mass following.
Okay, so you were there yesterday, and especially this morning, a lot more photos of the attendees has shown up. Can you unpack a little bit about who was there? I mean, tell us about the players of this movement. I mean, we've got, of course, Bishop Bagrat, we've got ARF, especially yet an ARF MP who's been at his side from the get-go. Who else has publicly voiced support, shown up, or been involved in this event?
Oh, I think it's, well, I mean, if you look at the outline of his general support, it's obviously the ARF, both inside of Armenia and the worldwide ARF, which garnered a lot of media for him, especially social media attention for him around the world.
Who I have to point out, in Canada, they wouldn't give him the time of day. When he was Bishop of Canada, they wouldn't. I mean, I remember those days.
I'm not from there, so I can't comment on that.
I mean, like it's interesting now. You have I won't name them. I don't want to drive traffic to their sites, but you have these guys who are supposedly news, and then all of a sudden it's like 5 times a day. It's God, country, and you've got Srpazan walking with a lamb and stuff. It's almost like it was coordinated. I wouldn't know better.
No, no. I mean, it was. If you look at the coalition, it's obvious. It was heavy church influence, church attendance. I mean, you see lots and lots of priests there.
Yeah, the bishop from Artsakh as well, right? From Dadivang, who showed up.
Yeah, so there's a lot of. It's the church essentially. It's the church. It's the ARF inside of Armenia and outside of Armenia, and it's related to Kocharian and his forces. And it's been joined today by people like Tavush and others. So it's essentially a lot of the old establishment, or as they call them in Armenia, the Nafkins. Yeah. But again, I think that gives you the political layout of who's who, while understanding that the cause that they have actually latched onto, in this case, is actually a lot more popular than they are.
Yeah, it doesn't delegitimize their demands. Yeah. It's just that, just based on photos and videos of who we saw yesterday, we had Levon Kocharian in the crowd, you had Seyran Ohanyan, you have Edward Sharmanazov, you've got, and then you have some interesting ones. You have supposedly pro-Western Bever, who showed up. These are the Sasna Zerer people. You also had former opposition figure and ambassador at large, Marukyan's people, who were supposedly there as well. So it was an interesting hodgepodge, and it was kind of unclear. I mean, I suppose that's kind of the odd part, right? Is that it's really unclear. Like, it feels almost anticlimactic.
No, it isn't. It isn't unclear because this is a protest movement. So protest movement essentially gets all kinds of people that don't share their values. I mean, everyone knows that the 80-90% of Armenians that supported the revolution in 2008, the moment the revolution ended, they're all going to go in separate directions because they come from different worlds. Yeah. So I think in one way, you just need to see this oddball collection is every protest movement is an oddball collection. Yeah. The issue is what comes out of it programmatically and who are the players behind it and what is it that they can make of it. So that part of it is unusual because these people really have nothing to do with each other, many of them. But in this case, they've managed to galvanize around this one issue because they see this one. They have genuine concerns about it from if we're looking at it from a non-cynical point of view. Yeah. And secondly, from a political point of view, it's something that is useful to their cause.
So do you see any legitimate threat to the government at this stage?
No.
You don't see elections being called?
No, because again, I think if people were on stage tearing this government down, we're also tearing the Russians down, talking about the importance that we need to all mobilize for national defense, talk about how this government is not rearming quickly enough, how we need to have, if you have some programmatic things that are, you're talking about the popular things that people support and not just one of them, then they would have a much bigger chance of getting a broader audience. But once you don't do that, and then you associate with these people that are easy to demonize, it becomes much easier for the other side to marginalize them.
That makes sense. Listen, one part that really doesn't sit well with me. What's your take on the church's role, the clergy's role in politics? Should they have a role?
Well, I mean that's a very difficult question to answer. Is because as a general rule, less church involvement in state is better for the state and for the church. Yeah, we know that as a matter of history. It doesn't hurt. Theocracies are obviously a disastrous idea. Not that they're advocating theocracy. However, to say that they have no role or they can't be a moral voice at times, I think that's also that's not accurate. They have there are specific times and places where they can actually speak with credibility. The issue is what credibility you have, what credibility the church has in this country, and institutionally the church is a marginal institution. It is not. Bagrat is far more popular, for example. Then that's the reason that he is leading this movement and not the Vahapar or the Archbishop of Yerevan, is because he's not tied to things like corruption and other things that people don't like or have reasons not to like you. So the church as an institution is more credible than the rest of the opposition. However, it does not have the credibility that it does in many other countries, like for example in Georgia, or like it did in Armenia back in the day when we had Vazgen Vahapar, who was universally beloved. So the church itself does not have that credibility. However, I think it would be to say that they have no role to ever speak on any issue. I don't think that's accurate also. At the end of the day, they're Armenian citizens, but as an organized body, it is not a good thing for them to be involved in politics.
Well, isn't the idea of them having tax-exempt status that they're not supposed to get involved in politics? That's supposedly the trade-off, right?
Generally, but that's a very Western concept.
I mean, you and I have talked about this before. Like, just imagine during the siege of Artsakh, having 100 derhars dressed in black, led by Vahapar, walking and facing down Azeri special forces and their, eco-terrorists blocking Lachin. Imagine the photos. Like it would galvanize the world, and they didn't do that.
Well, that's beyond.
That's what bugs me.
Well, yeah, it's beyond their imagination. I mean, listen, I think there's. I'm trying to be fair because I don't want to judge. Yeah. Not every person in the church is not credible. Not every person in church is corrupt. Yeah. However, institutionally, those problems are there, and you have to admit it, and you have to admit what their views are. Yeah, so I think we need to have this balancing act of saying, yes, they do have a role, they have something to say, they can say it. But to be actively involved in partisan politics and asking for an elected prime minister to resign, that's really not your role. You can talk about issues, you can talk about other things, you can talk about why this is wrong. So it's a balancing act, and we need to be careful about understanding the role without dealing with demagoguery of putting all of them in the basket of corruption and being wrong on everything.
Yeah, of course. It sets a dangerous precedent. I mean, same as the army 2 years ago, right? It's just, you swore an oath. I mean, it's a pretty dangerous precedent to set, in my opinion, anyway. Let's switch gears here. So, Prime Minister met with the big guy up in Moscow, and interestingly enough, what came out of it was an agreement that the Russian forces that had been deployed during and after the Karabakh War, without a contract, right? They're contractually on the border with Iran and Turkey, but on the Azeri border they're not. And apparently they're going to be withdrawing for throughout the entire border and also Zvartnots airport. What's your take on this? Is this tied with the delimitation?
No, this was in motion before. This is overall a good thing. No. Frankly, they were useless there anyway.
They were nefarious.
They were nefarious.
Worse than useless. They were blocking EU observers. I mean, this is...
No, it's worse than that. I've heard our commanders suspect that they give away whatever we do on our side to the other side because of the Baku-Moscow relationship. And they have no one has any proof of that, but that's what they have absolutely no relationship on the ground with Armenian forces. So they're a net negative. So them leaving is actually a good thing. And they're actually in a lot of places. If you go out of, if you go to these areas, you'll see a base, small base here, small base there. So them leaving is a general good. And obviously the Zvartnots thing was in the works. I think some people are mistaking this with them leaving the borders entirely. That's actually not the case. No. This is the post-2020.
Yeah, but they're legally there in Turkey.
Yeah, but we know that. The post-2020 was a lot and in a lot of places. Yeah. And they're uniformly despised wherever they're at, to be honest, because of all the things that have happened over the last year.
Yeah, makes sense. Finally, I want to touch up, as you know, today, our foreign minister is meeting with the Baku regime's foreign minister in Kazakhstan. I mean, to me, anyways, this could be an interesting litmus test. This is, they can reaffirm this Alma-Ata declaration, which is essentially what the government is presenting as a victory for this Tavush situation. Or they can back out of it, which would essentially, of course, make this supposed victory null and void. What's your prediction and what's your take on what's going to happen there?
I have no illusions about this meeting, that meeting. I don't think it really matters that much. I think we're likely to enter a period of what I call the phony peace, where the other side is going to talk peace. They're going to talk about how everything is possible, how demarcation is good, how you should never talk about Artsakh and forget about the POWs. And, they're going to talk peace from now till two things, until COP29 or until to see what happens in Ukraine, what happens in the U.S. presidential elections. Yep. So I think we'll be in this phony, this is the era of phony peace. I don't expect anything to be signed, barring major changes in international power relationships, i.e. Russian defeat in Ukraine and other things. So I think we're in this is a process, this is part of the process of the phony peace. I don't expect anything out of it.
Well, that's what I found interesting. 2-3 days ago, the PM, when he was doing his national address, he mentioned that Armenia definitely sees a possibility of signing a peace agreement by or before November. And I thought, it's an odd month to just decide on, and it's just U.S. presidential election, of course. So yeah, Eric John, thanks so much for coming on.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks again for watching Civilnet. I've been Pat, and we'll speak with you all very soon.